What's going on, guys? It's Cimoooooooo. So today I'm bringing to you 5 hidden side deck cards for the June 2019 format. Like I've said in all my previous videos this week, we are entering the WCQ format, and this format is by no means solved. Sure, we know what the best decks are. I talked about those in my top 5 meta decks video yesterday, but there's still so much experimentation as to figuring out what is, in fact, the correct way to build all these decks that people are trying to experiment with some interesting cards in the side deck that I noticed over the past weekend, and I wanted to go ahead and share those cards with you guys just so you either are aware of their existence, or if you want to try them out for yourself against particular matchups, might be something you want to see for yourself. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. So these are not in any particular order, although they are, it is like a top 5 list technically, but they're not ranked, like one's not necessarily better than the other because they all pertain to different matchups, and only specific decks can technically utilize specific cards that I'm going to be discussing. So just keep that in mind. But kicking things off with the first card I want to discuss, it's Black Garden. Now, Black Garden has popped up like here and there ever since Sky Striker has been a deck. People kind of take advantage of Black Garden because it's very similar to a card like Lost World, where dinosaurs have the ability to give the Sky Striker player a token, and by giving them that token, it pretty much shuts off all of their Sky Striker cards, meaning because they now have a monster in the main monster zone, they can't use stuff like Widow Anchor, Ego Booster, basically any of their Sky Striker cards are now completely offline. Well, Black Garden effectively does the same thing as Lost World, except it's not, a specific to the dinosaur archetype. Any deck can realistically play Black Garden, and I think that's what makes it pretty cool. But the thing is, you have to go about it one of 2 different ways. If your deck doesn't play Terraforming naturally, you're going to want to side deck like 3 copies of this. But if you do have Terraforming in your deck, which there are several decks in the format that play it, you could just play 1 copy, and then if you happen to draw your Terraforming, you can search it out, which means you can actually save yourself some side deck space. So having that ability to just lock your opponent out of being able to play any of their Sky Striker cards is very powerful. But there's another reason that this card is very good as well, and that is because of Mystic Mine. Not even just Mystic Mine Burn, but really any deck that is going to be taking advantage of Mystic Mine, because since you're able to just summon monsters to your opponent's board every time you summon one, and because when you summon you can link off monsters, reducing the number of monsters on your field, but your opponent's monster count is going to keep going up because they're going to get one of those tokens every single time you summon, you're going to be able to swing Mystic Mine back around on your opponent, which means all your effects are going to be able to go through. Sure, they might be a little bit weaker because of Black Garden's ability, but just being able to play is what you're looking for here, because then you can probably destroy Mystic Mine, and then usually if you're playing a deck that already incorporates a field spell, you can just play it over it, so then Black Garden's no longer on the field. Then you can pretty much go off completely uninterrupted. Black Garden's a really nice tech card that we've been seeing, and I think it's really cool to see that it actually has some application even in 2019. Now, since we already mentioned it, the second card on my list is Mystic Mine, and I know I've talked about Mystic Mine a lot in these past couple of videos, but the thing is, Mystic Mine is a card that doesn't come along very often, where it's actually a format warping card. You have to think, as soon as this card was released in Dark Neostorm, it completely shifted deck building dynamics because players now had to main deck spell and trap removal in the form of non-monster effects. Otherwise, if Mine comes down, they just completely and utterly lose, and there's really nothing they can do about it. Some players want to account for Mystic Mine being in the format, while others just completely ignore it and just take the fact that if they go up against Mystic Mine, they're going to lose that game 1. So the thing is, we're actually starting to see Mystic Mine in the side deck of some decks, kind of similar in philosophy to Black Garden, in the sense that if you're already playing Terraforming in your deck, you can play Mystic Mine in the side deck because it's like you're playing 3 copies instead of 1. You can search it, and if you're playing a combo deck, for instance, you can drop Mystic Mine on your opponent going second. All their hand traps are going to be turned off because Mystic Mine stops all effects. So it's almost like a magical mid-breaker field of sorts, as some of the top tier players have been saying, and that's actually really powerful. But it's actually better than mid-breaker field in a way, because mid-breaker field just prevents targeting and destruction, whereas this card protects you from like Ash Blossom. It just protects you from such a wider array of different effects, and not even just the hand traps. It stops effects on the field, effects in the graveyard, so on and so on, so it makes it that much more powerful. The thing is, when it comes to Mystic Mine, and the reason why I wanted to discuss it is not only because of the fact that people are starting to consider side decking it, going into the WCQ format, you have to go with the philosophy of figuring out how are people going to be approaching Mystic Mine, because the weird thing about Mystic Mine is that the dichotomy of the card existing in the format is very peculiar, because if a lot of people play Mystic Mine, the card becomes worse because then everyone's playing it, but then if people stop playing it, the people who are playing Mystic Mine have an edge because they are playing it, not to mention the dynamic of playing Spell and Trap removal. So if people are playing Spell and Trap removal, then people are not going to want to play Mystic Mine because it's not going to resolve and it loses its potency. And then if it goes out of the format, then people are going to stop playing the Spell and Trap removal, which brings Mystic Mine back into the format. You can kind of see where I'm going. It's a very cyclical type of behavior, and that's something you have to analyze for your specific metagame if you're going to any WCQ in your respective region, or even a region or even a local tournament as well. It's a very interesting dynamic that Mystic Mine creates, and that's why I wanted to discuss it in this video today, solely for the purpose that it is one of the most influential cards of our format. And just be mindful of the fact that if someone isn't main decking it, it could potentially be lurking in their side deck. Now, the third card I wanted to discuss is Mind Control, and I guess by extension Electric Virus as well. Both of these cards kind of do the same thing, but like depending on what deck you're going up against, one's better than the other, clearly, but Mind Control is the main focus here. Now, the reason why Mind Control is so fascinating is because this card does a lot in this format. It really isn't a surprise that Mind Control is a good card, because ever since Master Rule 4's implementation, Mind Control has been absurd, allowing you to take your opponent's Link monster and then link off with it, giving you the full established Link rating to be able to climb into like a Link 3 or Link 4 with one single card. Not to mention you're using the opponent's monsters, so you're removing their resource as well. The card is absolutely crazy. But when we're looking at this particular format, Mind Control kind of does something against every single one of the top decks. Against your Danger Thunder matchup, it's going to bait one negation at the very least, and that's pretty good if you're trying to break their board. Against your Danger Orcust matchup, if you can steal something like their Galatea, you can go ahead and play your own Dingirsu over it, and then you can use your own Dingirsu to start breaking apart their board. Going up against Salamangreat, it's great because you can take their Link monsters, and that kind of shuts down the potency of cards like Salamangreat Rage or something like Salamangreat Roar, just depending on what their back row may be. And then again, you can link off with it to do your plays, which makes it even more powerful as well. And don't forget about Sky Striker, because again, Sky Striker, not only does it take the Sky Striker Ace monster, but you're going to be able to link off with it, which means that that Ray isn't going to be jumping back onto the field from the graveyard. And yeah, when you're looking at Orcust and when you're looking at Danger Thunder Dragon, and I guess Sky Striker to an extent, Electric Virus is a little bit better because the monster that you take can attack and can also be tributed, which isn't too relevant, but could be. I guess being able to attack is very significant. And not to mention for Thunder, because Electric Virus happens to be a Thunder card, you're discarding a Thunder card, which allows you to go into your Colossus, which is a pretty cool interaction. You just have to keep that in mind that these cards are very, very powerful. Most people aren't going to be main decking them, especially not Electric Virus, but Mind Control could actually see play in the main deck in some sort of anti-meta strategy, but be mindful because these cards are extremely potent and can actually completely turn a game back around in your opponent's favor. Now, for my fourth card, I have probably the most overhyped card coming out of Dark Neostorm, and that's No Material. Now, up until this point, No Material has basically seen like no play whatsoever. I know people tried it out like on the release of Dark Neostorm just to see if it was actually worth the hype, but up until now, aside from like a couple very minor instances, this card has seen basically no play. But this past weekend, it actually saw a bit of an uptick, and this may be a trend going into the WCQs. And this is a card that's very specific to the format, and where you're not going to want to play it like all the time. It's kind of like a card like, you know, Droll, or one of those hand traps that's like very, very specific to the format, but depending on what format it may be, it could actually make a tremendous impact. Now, let's take a look at the top decks. Against Danger Thunder Dragon, if you know Material at specific points in their combo, they might not have anything that they can do, because the fact that No Material stops the monster from being able to use for any sort of material, not to mention you can't even like tribute it off for like Colossus or anything, is absolutely significant, and it kind of provides something that no other card currently does. Again, same thing for like Danger Orcust. You know, if you hit like their Mermaid or a couple of their cards for that matter, with no material, they may just stop entirely because they have no other follow-up play, because that's a very important choke point in the Orcus matchup. Look at Salamangreat. I mean, Salamangreat is the exact same thing. It's not like as high impact versus the other combo decks, but again, if you prevent your opponent from getting to the point where they establish their entire full Salamangreat combo, that could be enough for you to just OTK and win on the next turn. And the thing is, if you're able to pull it off, especially on turn 0, because realistically you're not going to be playing it anytime past that, this could be one of the most impactful cards of the WCQ season. So definitely keep your eye out, because no material is definitely lurking. So wrapping up the video with my 5th and final hidden side deck card for the June 2019 WCQ format, if there is a time for this card to be good, it's going to be now, because it's Ghost Sister and Spooky Dogwood. Now there's only a very select few people that have been side decking this card as of lately, but this card is on no one's radar, and this card can be stealing games left and right. And the reason for that is quite simple, because if you're playing a control style deck that happens to have very long games, not because you're intentionally drawing out the length of them, but if you're playing something like Sky Striker, or maybe like Altergeist, or some other sort of trap deck, or just a deck that just has naturally long games because you're not able to output a lot of damage and you're more focused on controlling the board state, then having a card like this going into game 3 can just solidify your win. Yeah, sure, Sky Striker has something like Kinda going into time, but the thing is, Kinda's really only good if you're going first, where Ghost Sister and Spooky Dogwood can be used if your opponent is going first and can honestly just win you the game. It's this type of environment, the WCQ season, where you start to see stuff like this pop up because people aren't really prepared for it and aren't thinking that this is even going to be a threat. So it isn't the most high impact card out of all the other cards we discussed, because it's very niche in its application. It's not Max C by any stretch of the imagination, even though it kind of creates a very similar dynamic to that. But when it comes to time, and when you've got two extremely heavy combo decks in the format, this card could actually be a diamond in the rough. We'll just have to see, but do not underestimate this card, because this card can just be sniping wins out of nowhere. So guys, that's gonna do it for the video. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about what other hidden side deck cards you've been seeing in these past few weeks. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. So guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always, subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content, and if you found this video informative, consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a YouTube channel member, because just by showing your support in any way that you can, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.